Hi YouTube, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery. You can find us on the web, caltoncutlery.com. Today I'm going to do probably the first in a series, no particular time frame, no particular order or anything, about grinding knives. There's some big differences between grinding knives or just building or having a 2x72 grinder and using it to, I don't know, deburr a couple of parts on a car that you're working on, making a knife occasionally here and there, and making knives making a lot of knives. There's a couple of real big differences there. If you just built a 2x2, if you just have a grinder and you built it and you make, one knife a week or one knife a month or something like that, this video and this series will still help. But it's really geared toward the guys that are making lots and lots of knives, and you can stand here at these grinders for hours and hours sometimes on the same dang knife. Just depends on what the knife is. I mean, I know a large chopper, heck, I can have 2 or 3 hours worth of grinding time just in that one knife alone. A little, one of my large pairs, I might have, 10 minutes into rough grinding, another 15 minutes into finish grinding, and then however long to put whatever kind of finish that I want on it. But anyway, so like any activity, it all starts with your machine and your stance in relation to that machine. The video that got me thinking I should probably do this series of videos, there was a guy on YouTube and he found one of my videos on building a belt grinder. And he built an amazing looking belt grinder. I mean, it looks really cool. But he had a big old shelf on the bottom that held a 5-gallon bucket. And it held that bucket underneath the grinder, so that, the sparks and the grit and everything, could fall into that bucket. Which is good, I mean, that keeps a lot of mess off the floor. But he had that bucket sitting way out. So the closest that he could get to that grinder was about here. Now you're grinding out here, not only are you not very steady, but that's going to put an enormous amount of strain on your body. So you could grind like that for, half hour, an hour every once in a while, but boy, if you were to start grinding, say, 4 to 6 hours a day for, the next 3 weeks, boy, it'd put a hurting on you pretty bad. So that's why I thought I'd go ahead and start with the grinders, the way I like to set mine up, and my body position in relation to the grinder when I'm grinding, in the hopes that it'll save you guys a whole bunch of sore backs, and a whole bunch of not good stuff. So anyway, so I use these 4 grinders on pretty much a daily basis. And if you look at them, pretty much, now I do have buckets underneath the 2 most used ones, but the front edge of that bucket is just a couple of inches away from the face of the platen. Now I do have these, they're just duct work, that directs the grit and the dust and everything down into the bucket. But see how close they are in line? Pretty much that belt is sitting maybe 2.5 inches back from the farthest thing, that would be closer to me from that. This grinder over here is about the same way. Let's see if I can get you, see how much of a straight shot that is? And there's nothing coming out in front of it that would get in the way of me getting up to that grinder. Now my newest grinder, well, the 4x36, I don't really spend a whole lot of time on it. I use it mostly for handles, really, flattening handle scales on 3-piece knives, and the little disc grinder over there for squaring off edges and stuff. My newest grinder is a three-wheeled grinder, and it's kind of the same way. If you look at it from the side, here is the edge of the table, and the second to the smallest wheel I have is right, probably a 1/2 inch forward of the edge of that table, which means that I can get right up in there, right up to that wheel. Now the larger wheels, you know, they'll stick out a little bit farther, or, you know, but every single one of them, I can get right up next to that wheel. And that is what I wanted to shoot the video about. In any activity, sports, grinding, walking, your stance is usually one of your most important things. I don't know if that's probably too close. So if you go onto YouTube and start looking at videos of knife makers and watching them grind a knife, typically, well, not very many guys use the two-wheel upright style. Most of the guys, I think, are using like a three-wheel. Most of them are also using commercial versions, not homemade jobbers like what I've got. But a lot of times you'll see a guy walk up and put a knife like this. I mean, his chest is a foot away from that belt, okay? Which means that he's got an awful lot more stress, because that knife, that belt is trying to pull that knife down. And so this far away from your body, you're fighting everything. Now, you get up real close to that belt, and now all of a sudden, things get an awful lot easier. Just body position. I mean, it's the same way like when I was a kid and I went to take karate when I was, I don't know, 16 years old. You know, I was 6 foot tall and 170 pounds or something, and my instructor was a little Asian woman. She was, I don't know, 5 foot tall and maybe 80 or 90 pounds, and she threw me across the room and didn't even break a sweat doing it. It's all about body position. Same way as if you see, you can see videos of a 90-year-old man teaching a 20-year-old man how to forge. The 90-year-old man's 130 pounds, the 20-something-year-old guy is, you know, 200 plus, and that 90-year-old man is out forging that 20-year-old guy 10 times to 1 because he doesn't have the stance and he doesn't have, you know, the body mechanics down. So anyway, when you're grinding, I guess my biggest point for this video is to get close. I mean, I understand that this grinder in particular, this one right here, is a 2-horse variable speed. It's got a lot of power. It can go really fast or really slow, and I know that can be kind of intimidating, but once you get used to that grinder, you know, you'll learn how close you can get to it, and the closer you can get, the better. Now here, let me throw some safety glasses on, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. I'll let you, I got just a, you know, an experimental knife here I'd forged out, a couple of years ago. Okay, there's the belt, there's the wheel. Yeah, I was playing around with that one trying to forge an integral guard, and ever since then I just threw it up here on the bench and it sits there most of the time. But anyway, make sure you can see. Now watch how close this knife stays to my belly. Now I got the grinder on low speed, but it's still going to be kind of loud, so I might want to turn your volume down a little bit. Okay, now that is probably fairly close to the way I grind, you know, when I grind knives without the camera being here. I might be pulling a little bit farther back so that you guys can see in there, but I usually like to sit right up in here if I'm doing, well, if I'm using this portion of the platen. You know, my my apron here is, I don't know, 2 to 3 inches away from the belt. I've got my wrists braced up against my belly. My feet are, you know, a comfortable width apart. I think my right toe is maybe 3 inches away from the No, it's probably 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches away from the face of this wheel right here. But anyway, everything's real nice and close. I can stand pretty much upright. It does get to be kind of a pain in the neck if you haven't been grinding a while, you know, because you're staring down the whole time. But that's a little bit better than grinding clear out here. Now watch. Now as far as the steadiness of just your stance, okay, you saw that blade was fairly steady as it went across and as it came back. Okay, that's because my hips are as close to the grinder as I can get. Now watch what happens when I put my hips another 4 inches back. I'm going to turn the grinder on again. Okay, now just that one little change, stepping roughly 4 inches back, I could feel the knife wanting to pull down quite a bit more because I had nothing to brace against. My wrists are hanging out here in no man's land. There's nothing to brace against. Okay, I also kind of feel the pull on my lower back, you know, as I'm trying to lean in and push, and it's just generally a much less pleasant experience. So I guess, oh, one more thing. So let's say you're grinding a knife. Okay, well, a knife is real thin. You can belly up and you can get right up in there on that belt. Okay, and there ain't nothing to get in the way. What happens if you're working on handles? All right, well, if you're working on handles, obviously you're not going to be able to get as close as what you would when you're working on when you're grinding a blade, but it's still the same. Get your hips up, get as close as you can, and still have a good amount of movement, and then grind from there. Same thing as I was making a slingshot today. Now that is going to be, if I'm grinding up in here, I can get real close. Grinding on the face of it, I can get up in real close like that. If I'm grinding on the forks or profiling around on the handle, now obviously I have to stay a little bit farther back. So it's all a matter of relationship to whatever it is that you're grinding. But try the next time you fire up the grinder and go to grind, especially on a long grinding day. Let's say you got 15 knives to grind the main bevels on that day. Try 7 of them with your normal stance, and then get an inch closer and try 7 more of them, and see if you see any difference. The same thing applies with your 3-wheel grinders. Let's get you kind of in line here. Okay. Let's grab this junk knife here again. I mean, get up in there close. The worst that can happen is, a belt breaks while you're grinding with it. Or your sleeves get caught up into the belt, or that's really about it. I mean, these grinders, they look and sound pretty intimidating, but they're really, in my experience so far, they're fairly safe machines. But get right up in there and get in close. You can brace your wrists up against your rib cage or on your hips, or up higher on your rib cage if you need to, but it'll be an awful lot nicer and easier and much less strain on your back and everything else if you get closer. On the platen, generally speaking, you won't be able to get as close. Let's get you back so you can see the face of my apron to the belt. If you were grinding the bevels, you can get right up on in here. The second you turn it to the side, usually you need to step back just a little bit. But here you've got the platen. It's supporting the workpiece from getting pulled down, and pretty much all you're doing is just standing there and profiling it. Of course, when you're profiling knives, you're usually using pretty coarse, fairly worn out belts. You're hogging steel off. This is my fast grinder. It runs like 5,500 surface feet per minute. It's pretty fast. And so you got grit and everything flying all over the place. So you want to stay a little bit farther back. But for any of your detail work, try getting up in there closer, getting your hips as close as you can to that belt, while still being comfortable and maintaining control, and see if you like it. Getting 1 inch closer to that belt a lot of times will make the difference between you tiring out on the 10th knife or you tiring out on the 20th knife for that day. Anyhow, hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you next time.